Hello and welcome to Network Africa with me, Cynthia Arena. Now, after almost 2 years of conflict, which has nearly crippled the world's newest country, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and rebel commander Riek Machar have signed a deal to bring the conflict to an end. The ceasefire agreement was signed at talks in Ethiopia. However, consultations will continue on the contentious issue of a future government and power sharing. The conflict, which erupted in December 2013, has displaced about 1.5 million people, and earlier ceasefire deals have not lasted.
Mediators in the South Sudan conflict confirmed the South Sudanese President Salva Kiir and rebel commander Riek Machar signed another ceasefire agreement this morning, edging them closer to a final deal to end a 15-month conflict that has ravaged the world's newest country. The conflict in Africa's newest nation and one of its poorest erupted in December 2013 and has rumbled on since then, despite several commitments by President Kiir and rebel leader Machar to halt the violence. More than 10,000 people have been killed, more than 1.5 million people have been driven from their homes, and many in the oil-producing nation of about 11 million people are struggling to find enough food to eat. Kiir and Machar, with top negotiators, have held a series of meetings this week in Addis Ababa on the sidelines of an African Union summit, under mounting pressure from regional states that are dealing with refugees that have fled across the border. Few other details were revealed after frantic late-night talks. Regional diplomats had warned the warring sides that failure to come up with a new deal could see sanctions imposed on them. The chairperson of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and the Ethiopian Prime Minister said he and other regional leaders were confident that the two leaders would respect what they had signed.
I am confident that the two leaders will respect what they have signed today. In the coming February, we will see that a comprehensive peace agreement will be signed. This is what the people of South Sudan are expecting, and the people of the region and also the international community are expecting from the leaders. Failure to do so will have a grave consequence to all of us, and specifically to the leaders of South Sudan.
The two sides have in principle agreed to sharing power and a transitional government, but details have not yet been finalized. They also need a transitional government in place by July, when Kiir's presidential term runs out. Several possible ideas have been discussed on how to split executive powers, either with the president or prime minister, or president and vice president. Rights groups have said both factions are responsible for ethnic killings and other abuses, driving the nation to the brink of famine. The fighting has largely pitted Kiir's Dinka ethnic group against Machar's Nuer group.
They fired us, we defended ourselves, must not be allowed, because there is no need of firing at any of the other parties, so that the other one will also respond in kind. A complete end to this cessation of hostilities and to the crisis is expected in South Sudan as of this morning.
Some regional officials and diplomats said the risk was that unless a deal was reached soon, recent skirmishes that erupted after the end of the rainy season late last year could expand into a full-scale offensive as the ground dries out.
Joining me now live from Washington, D.C. is the Voice of America's editor in South Sudan in Focus program, John Tanza. John, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. It's good to have you again.
Your thing is from okay, I can hear you.
Now, I believe you can hear me. I'd like to start by asking what the catalyst was that probably triggered this new ceasefire deal. Well, we're having a bit of audio issues now with John Tanza, but we will try to reconnect with him. But for now, 6 Bulgarian air crew were released this weekend by Sudan People's Liberation Army North, that's also known as SPLAN, rebel forces in Sudan, after the UN's World Food Programme authorized their flight through an active war zone. On January the 26th, the WFP helicopter was shot down while flying from Rumbek in South Sudan to the Sudanese capital Khartoum on what was meant to be a standard maintenance flight approved by Sudanese government and South Sudanese aviation officials. But authorities did not appear to realize they were sending the aircraft and crew directly through an active conflict zone. Ludomir Gelev, the pilot in command, was unaware that they had been shot at by anti-aircraft weaponry. By the time he realized the helicopter had a technical failure, he attempted to divert to Kadugli before being forced to land in the bush to the east of the town.
Oil pressure began to fall down very fast, so the only decision was to land immediately. So we landed as fast as we can.
The 6-member crew from Sofia-based contractor Heli Air was all working for United Nations World Food Programme. They were treated very well once the identities and flight schedules had been confirmed in Rumbek with a general of the SPLAN. They've now been safely handed over to WFP in South Sudan with the cooperation of SPLAN officials.
They kept us for 2 days somewhere in the mountain. Treated very well. Appreciate this, especially when they told us they checked with Rumbek. The people there, they confirmed they know us. So after this, everything was fine.
The SPLAN spokesman confirmed the military fired on the helicopter, suspecting the aircraft belonged to enemy Sudanese government forces, SAF. The crew was detained on January the 26th by SPLAN, who control most of South Kordofan's remote Nuba mountain region. Since the beginning of the year, fighting in the Nuba Mountains has been escalating as Sudanese government forces and SPLAN rebels rally for support in the run-up to the general elections scheduled in April. The war in the Nuba Mountains is now entering its 4th year and remains one of the most underreported in the world. Khartoum has led an aerial bombing campaign on the Nuba Mountains using Antonov bombers, jet fighters and artillery, attacking civilians, targeting villages and crops on a daily basis, causing thousands to flee across the border into neighboring countries like South Sudan. WFP do not work or supply any aid in the region. All NGOs, aid organizations and journalists have been banned by Sudan's government since the war began. Anu Lodi, the spokesperson for the political wing of the SPLAN, said questions need to be raised as to why permission was given by Sudan's government for a humanitarian aircraft to fly that route when the government is engaged in aerial and ground warfare in the territory specified on the flight plan.
Why the government of Sudan are allowing such humanitarian worker to fly over the war zone, and especially during the intensified war. The government of Sudan has launched the heaviest and very dangerous offensive since the war broke out in the north in more than 4 fronts in the East Kadugli and around and also North Talodi, and the same days and the same time where they just ask this humanitarian worker to fly over this war. So this is a very important question the government of Sudan should answer.
WFP are currently active on the other side of the border in South Sudan, delivering food aid to some of the 230,000 refugees displaced by Sudan's civil war. The war in South Kordofan and Blue Nile states has displaced over 400,000 civilians so far. The Bulgarian cruise pilot said they knew nothing about the danger in that region.
Interesting why this area is not on the maps. Because we are working around in Darfur, in South Sudan, and we don't know about this. For every flight, you are issuing a flight plan, which the authorities, in this case in South Sudan, Khartoum, they're receiving this flight plan, they authorizing it, they saying yes. It's written which date, at what time you are taking off, what route You are following what altitude, what time you are arriving, and nobody says nothing. Nobody asked, they just accepted the flight plan, and nobody says, hey, why this road?
Despite this, little is known about the conflict, and even fewer are aware of what's going on, making Nuba Mountains one of the most forgotten wars in the world. Now, over here in Nigeria, the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, that's General Muhammadu Buhari, has given indications that if elected, he will work with the private sector to achieve rapid and inclusive growth of the economy as well as create jobs. Now, at a meeting with the organized private sector in Lagos with the theme GMB means business, he assured the gathering of plans to grow the economy with focus on key sectors including power, manufacturing and infrastructure. General Buhari also promised to ensure favorable taxation and the construction of refineries, among other things, if voted in.
Getting the Nigerian economy back on its feet is top on the minds of many. And as most governments have realized, the private sector is instrumental to achieving rapid and inclusive growth. And that's what this meeting is about.
As practical as it's possible to do so, our policies for implementing our commitments will be governed by the highest consideration of how they create jobs.
This gathering has players from across the board, and most in attendance agree that reviving the economy needs, among other things, a vibrant power sector and favorable tax system. And General Buhari gives this assurance.
Power supply is the minimum that we can seriously commit in order to quickly galvanize the economy back to productivity. We agree with the privatization of the power utilities, but we believe it must go further to transmission. We would like, in consultation with you, to explore options of reducing taxes and customs